views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Good evening and welcome to Bronx Talk. Our guest tonight is Assemblyman Louis Sepulveda. He is one of Mayor de Blasio's biggest Bronx supporters, both before and since his election. But the mayor has been under fire from federal investigators, from a governor who seems bent on, hypothetically, cutting his legs off, and from a public that has plunged his approval ratings. We'll also talk about a hearing that the Assemblyman held today about keeping ex-offenders out of jail, and the race for president and his support for Bernie Sanders, and a lot more. If you'd like to talk on the program with a question or comment, the phones are open. Please call in at 718-960-7261 or send an email to us at BronxTalk@BronxNet.org or post it on our Facebook page, and we'll read it on the air during a future edition of our program. For the here and now, the Assemblyman from the 87th Assembly District in the Bronx. Welcome back, Louis Sepulveda. Nice to have you.
Thank you. Pleasure being here.
Before we talk about any of the topics that I had just listed at the top of the show, I think we both would want to offer sympathy to the families and survivors of that horrible shooting in Orlando. You told me just prior to the show that you had just come from the Stonewall Inn downtown. Mm-hmm. Why do you think we're getting these shootings time and time again? You had an incident, maybe less in terms of severity, but no less serious, of a Muslim band being attacked in your community. Why do you think we're getting those things now?
Well, I think a part of it is the political rhetoric that's coming from a presidential candidate like Donald Trump. When he makes some of the when he has some of the discussions that he has about banning Muslims, Muslim immigrants. If you hear today his speech, he focused on radical Muslims, talking about preventing them from coming into this country. You know, the only problem is with this particular incident, the individual who committed the atrocity is an American citizen. So when you have this kind of rhetoric permeating television, newspapers, journalists from the right, it tends to justify and give people the strength, so to speak.
Maybe empower them somewhat.
To some degree, empower them, and people that have mental issues as it is, think that this is okay, that this kind of behavior is okay. Mm-hmm. And so that's why you have these kinds of issues. You also couple that with how easy it is to get automatic rifles, especially in the South, with the Republican Congress taking absolutely all steps to prevent you from banning AK-47s and automatic rifles in this country. And you have people with mental illness. That's a bad combination. And so I think that's what's happening, and that's what that's what's breeding. The breeding ground is there.
Every single time something like this happens, you heard it certainly from the president, you heard it from Hillary Clinton, certainly not from Donald Trump, but that's a political thing. There is discussion about getting the AK-47s and the AR-15s off the streets, assault weapons off the streets. Why can't we make that happen? Or maybe I should ask it in a more hopeful way, is this finally the straw that will break the camel's back? Because even if you accept what you had said, without that sort of weapon, we're not going to have the kind of carnage we had just the other night.
Well, look, if the incident in Connecticut didn't give us justification for going strong at the issue of banning assault weapons in this country, this is unfortunately, it's a sad occurrence. It's 50 people lost their lives, but this has happened before. The NRA is a very powerful lobby in this country. The Republican right is in the pockets of the NRA, and they are more fearful of the NRA than they are of public opinion. What happened in Newtown, Connecticut, that alone should have had, the impact should have been great. We should have banned assault weapons right there and then. But, again, they're a very powerful lobby, and until we can break the power, until the Republicans in Congress lose their fear of the NRA, you're not going to see, much of a change. Even today, I mean, they'll find ways of justifying it. You read, well, you can't blame the individuals who produce the AK-47s. It's the people that commit atrocities. Well, people are the ones that suffer from mental illness. And until you make it impossible for assault rifles, assault weapons to circulate in the United States, you're going to have more of these horrific acts. And unfortunately, I think it's going to happen sooner than later.
I was going to start the program with a dialogue about the mayor, but since we're talking about the Republicans and the national Republicans, let's talk about the national race, and you brought it up. Democrats all over the country are saying to Bernie Sanders, you ought to step aside at this point and increase the chances of defeating Donald Trump and maybe even defeating this Republican bloc in November. He seems determined not to do that. You have been among his most ardent supporters in the Bronx. Should he step aside at this point when it is pretty clear he can't win?
Well, I mean, look, until the convention occurs, Hillary Clinton took quite a long time to eventually concede. In fact, I remember she had a press event where everyone thought she was going to concede late in the election, and she didn't. In fact, she doubled down. And until the convention is completed, and until Bernie Sanders decides to concede, I'm not going to not support him. I don't abandon ship just because things aren't looking very good. His message is what's important to me.
Let me just interject, not looking very good. I mean, the numbers are what they are. I mean, I can't imagine what could happen that would turn those numbers around. I appreciate that you want to support him, but by staying in the race, is he empowering Donald Trump and the Republicans, who you just said, for example, are a block against a real gun reform?
No, I don't believe that. I mean, I think Hillary Clinton is going to have to convince not only the Bernie Sanders supporters, but independents to vote for her. I think at the end of the day, we'll reach some consensus between Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton, and you'll have a come-together moment. And if, in fact, Bernie Sanders supports her, then it's going to be Hillary's responsibility and job to get the Bernie Sanders people, especially the Bernie or Bust movement, to support her. And she's going to have to work to get the support of independents, because you can't win a presidential election without the support of independents. And she's polling very low with independents.
Does he have a better chance to get some of his agenda across if he were to, for want of a better term, play ball and work with the DNC to get some of his items on the platform, so that even if he himself is not the one carrying the ball, but in fact he can move his agenda forward and have a better chance to do that if he does that now than if he angers Democrats all along the way?
Well, I think he's already moved Hillary more to the left. I mean, from the beginning of this race, Hillary was, she was a proud centrist, so she said. But if you talk about things like income inequality, which was a central tenet of Bernie Sanders' campaign, when she realized that that's an important message within that wing of the Democratic Party, then she started talking about income inequality. So I think he's already moved her to the left. If there are any particular other points of his agenda, I mean, I'm sure that the candidates will get together, the party will come together, and they'll discuss about where the party wants to go. You got to remember that part of his agenda was also that he abhors the backroom political deals, right? He wants to let the people decide where the agenda is going to go, where this country is going to go. And so, eventually we'll come together and we'll come up with the support of a candidate.
Could he, for example, using just the example that you gave, could he right now be in a better position if he were to back off to broker a discussion on superdelegates and saying we need to change the system than if he keeps pushing and then ultimately gets defeated, and then frankly it's too late to have that discussion? He could sit there and get that on the DNC platform right now.
Well, I don't know if that's the case. I mean, we hope that that's the case. We hope that if he does push, that we can get more of the agenda that was important to me. And as I said, it was all about income inequality and other issues with the Secretary Clinton that I have problems with. And I think that we still have time. There's still a lot of time left, so that the party can come together and ultimately defeat whoever the Republican nominee is.
Last question on this, because I do want to talk with you about the mayor. Is he taking a chance that he will weaken her to a point where Donald Trump will do better?
I believe that if any Democrat, when you consider what Donald Trump stands for, what he speaks about, what his agenda and platform is, I believe that any Democrat can defeat Donald Trump. And if any Democrat doesn't, then that Democrat shouldn't be the nominee for the party.
All right, let's talk about the mayor. As I mentioned at the top of the show, you have been literally his most ardent Bronx supporter before and since the election. Why do you think his poll numbers are down?
Well, you look at the barrage of what's happening with the ethics issues, the fundraising issues. You also take into account that the press, I think, delights to some degree in taking the mayor down. Remember, he was
this mayor in particular more so than, let's say,
I think so.
Giuliani and Bloomberg?
I think so. I think there's something to be said with the fact that, when the press talks about the mayor, they don't talk about all the great things that he's done for the city of New York. I mean, he's had a progressive agenda that's helped a lot of people. Like, UPK has been, a revolutionary concept with the city of New York. You have parents who can now send their kids to start learning at a younger age. Remember that improves their ability to graduate from high school and college. You look at what happened with Mayor de Blasio's race. He was, I believe, one of the only, if not very few, mayors who won the mayoralship without the endorsement of any major any major newspaper in the city of New York. The Daily News didn't endorse him. The New York Times didn't endorse him. Everyone with other candidates. So I think to some degree that plays into what's happening with the mayor. You also talk about the fact that there's some like the New York Post. They don't particularly care for his agenda because it's a progressive agenda, and so they also take delight in attacking the mayor. Look, in this country, there's a presumption of innocence. Right? He hasn't even been charged with any crime, and until that happens, I'm going to support the mayor. He has been very good for the Bronx. He has been very good for my district. He's been very helpful to my community. He's a lot of his agenda, affordable housing. You see the education scores are creeping up. So he's done a lot of great things for the city of New York, and let's give him credit for that. And let's not focus on again, until he is charged with a crime. If you recall when Shelley Silver was the speaker, we supported him. Certainly I did. I was one of the first to break away once he was indicted. And I said, we cannot have a speaker who's under indictment. And I don't think the mayor is going to be indicted. I don't think he's committed any indictable offenses. Until then, I will continue to give him credit for the good things that he's done.
I would just say, as an aside, that's a rather unfortunate comparison because that I'm assuming is a direction you nor anybody in the city wants to go. Mm-hmm. You used the word progressive a couple of times.
Yes.
Yet when you hear the allegations in the investigations, or at least what these investigations are about, these not only are not progressive, potentially progressive fundraising tactics, but smack of the worst of the old school, party, campaign funding raising and all these other things. The allegations or the suggestion for the public, and again, the public, judgment. I understand someone's innocent until proven guilty, but when it comes out and you start to look at the people the mayor is associated with, we can talk about the Norman Seabrook situation. People start to look up and say, wait a minute. This is not progressive. This is old-style politics. This is how they did it in the old days when it was literally pay for play.
But Gary, that's the point. You use the operative word here. These are allegations. All right. We don't know if the mayor was behind all of this. We don't know what the mayor's role was, whether it was direct or indirect. And until then, I'm an attorney by practice. I'm a practicing attorney. I don't, to me, everyone gets the presumption of innocence until proven guilty. These are all allegations. Let's see what happens. Let the information come out. If any DA is going to follow through with this, if any law enforcement, the federal government, federal authorities, let's see what happens. And then we'll make a judgment based on that. But until now, I have to look at the good things that the mayor has done for the city of New York and for the Bronx.
I'll give you two examples. One, the indictment of Norman Seabrook. It certainly had to be embarrassing. I mean, this is the guy who was the bag man who pled guilty to fraud conspiracy charges, was a central figure in one of the half dozen federal corruption investigations that are focused on the mayor's fundraising. His name is Jonah Rechnitz, if you hadn't heard about it. He also, that guy, served on the mayor's inaugural committee. Now, there's no, certainly it hasn't been proven that the mayor has done anything wrong, but the mayor had said just the other day, I regret that I ever met the man.
Sure, absolutely.
Can you understand at least why the public opinion is turning against the mayor?
Well, I'm not saying that I can't understand it. I mean, of course I can understand it. But from my perspective as a supporter of the mayor is, let's see what happens. These are allegations. If anything is proven, then obviously I cannot no longer support the mayor. And even with the Norman Seabrook story, when you read the New York Times story, there's a blur in there towards the end. I mean, when you read the story initially, it sounds like the mayor somehow was directly involved, but then towards the end of the story, it says at the very end, well, there's no direct link to the mayor with respect to this Norman Seabrook story. And that's what the papers have been doing. Anytime there's any allegation about anyone now, somehow they want to tie it to the mayor, and that's unfair.
What about this idea of agents of the city? Good government groups have criticized the practice, particularly because 4 of the 5 have worked on his political campaigns or are involved in investigations into the fundraising. It's a concept that, you know, all of a sudden I've got these 5 people, we're going to call them agents of the city, apparently to avoid any questions of conflict of interest. It's like kind of creating a position that never really existed before.
Right, but is there something illegal, unlawful, or corrupt about having agents of the city? I mean, what
Well,
is
if
their
it
function?
turns out that some of them, did fundraising, and
Sure,
then
yeah.
ultimately Jonathan Rosen has real estate and not-for-profit clients who do business before the city, and now all of a sudden he gets a special designation from the mayor. Does it pass the smell test?
Well, that's the issue here. These are all allegations. We don't know exactly what they've done. Again, I cannot judge the mayor until something concrete. If there's some indictment, something that proves that the mayor was directly involved in wrongful acts and wrongful dealings in selling the city, then of course I could no longer support someone like that, regardless of who it is. But as of right now, again, you're innocent until proven guilty.
Do you think Governor Cuomo has it in for the mayor? And this is an odd position for you to be in because you're a state legislator and you've got to go to Albany and presumably you want the governor to back some things that you support. Do you think some have suggested the governor was behind the investigations or kind of put the federal Bureau of Investigations up to it?
Look, I don't know enough. I'm not in the in crowd with the governor. I don't know what the governor's motivations are, and I don't profess to know, and I won't speculate about that. But it's no big secret that there's no love lost between them. I mean, they've been at it for some time now, regardless of there's some issues that potentially could have hurt the city of New York, CUNY, Medicaid, but luckily the Assembly is a sentinel to make sure that the city is not impacted by any kind of bad blood between the mayor and the governor. But I can't sit here and say the mayor is the one who's behind this, and he's the motivation of all this is the governor.
You brought up this thing about CUNY. I've asked many of your colleagues this question while they've been on the show. Do you think the governor's proposal to, $500 million to cut that out of the CUNY budget, was that anywhere near serious? I mean, that would be devastating to the entire city university system. Do you think he did that because he thought realistically this was a budgetary item we needed to save on, or was this a direct, for want of better term, Bronx language, one of these against the mayor of the city of New York?
What his motivation was, I don't know, but I can tell you this. I could tell you what happened when he proposed that in the State of the State, that the Assembly got together in a way that I've never seen, such unity amongst the downstate Assembly persons. And there was an amount of pushback that I don't think, if he thought that was going to be smooth sailing, my colleagues in the Assembly were ready to put up a fight, even go beyond session to make sure that didn't happen.
Editorially, I would suggest, and I think I've said it on the show before, I don't think he proposed that as a serious thing. I can't imagine, it just seemed too outlandish. I was like, that's me saying it, I'm not putting it on the Assembly. Wow. Let's talk about this hearing that you were part of today about basically after prison what? So somebody comes out of prison, nobody wants to see them go back into prison, yet recidivism is such a big issue. Let's talk about the kinds of things that the hearing exposed and what you think solutions might be.
The problem with people who are formerly incarcerated when they're released is that there is no home. Many of them are homeless. A grand percentage of them are homeless.
Let's just define that. Rather than potentially go back into a life that can be productive, where they can resurrect their lives, they literally are going into the shelter system.
Oh, some of them are homeless. Forget about the shelter system. Some of them are dropped off at a station with their belongings in a bag, and there is nowhere else for them to go.
Right.
There's no hope in their lives when this happens. So we had a hearing today to see if we can provide ideas, new ideas, think out of the box. Because part of the problem with providing transitional homes, homeless services for people that are formerly incarcerated is the mentality that we have as Americans, right? Why are we expending our funds to help somebody who committed a crime? The way I think about it is let's invest in programs that are going to save the taxpayer money. And what you have is there's several programs that are either in the offing. The governor has proposed for 6,000 units, consider about $30 million for several programs in the city of New York that are going to provide transitional services, a holistic approach. We give them housing with the thought of having it become permanent housing. You provide health services, mental health services, job training. You take a holistic approach so that these individuals do not go and commit other crimes, go back into the system, then go into a shelter, transitional housing, back into the system, because that doesn't work. And as we know, the definition of insanity is to keep doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results.
Look for a different result.
So we had people who know a lot more about this topic. For years have been fighting to help people who are being released from prison, so that they get into an environment where they can succeed. We can't handcuff them from when they get out, because they're not going to succeed and they're going to wind up going back to prison.
Could somebody who is homeless and has lived a life that has not crossed the legal boundaries say, well, wait a minute, I need that kind of support. I need supportive housing. I need that kind of, whether it be mental health support or another support. And guess what? I'm not getting rewarded with the support from the government. Whoever that was, he went to jail. I'm not saying that he shouldn't get it, but I've lived a clean life. Why shouldn't I get it?
But that's exactly what I said. That's the mindset. Some people say, well, he went to jail.
That's why I'm presenting it to you.
Well, look, we are doing a lot of programs for affordable housing. Both the governor and the mayor, part of their platform, their agenda has been providing affordable housing to people who can't afford to pay rent in the city as they are. But these particular individuals, we're releasing 25 to 50,000 prisoners a year, and half of them wind up homeless. These particular individuals are going to cost us more money in the end, because once they go back into prison, it costs us more money to keep them incarcerated. It costs us more money in law enforcement. And so why not think of programs that are going to allow them to succeed and reduce the cost of the taxpayer to keep these individuals in prison or committing crimes? That's what the whole process is about. That's where you have to think out of the box so that we can save money.
Let's talk about this kinship legislation
Yes.
I know that you feel very strongly about.
Right.
And I think this would be the first explanation to the public of what it is. What is this kinship legislation?
Well, it's something that we're going to propose as a result of the hearing today. One of the presenters indicated that there's a pilot program that they want to initiate with $500,000. And what is many people that are released from prison have nowhere to go. Families can't take them because they can't afford to have them in a home. And so what the kinship program will do is provide a subsidy to families. It's a very successful program in Sweden, where you're paid a subsidy to take the formerly incarcerated person, a family member. It's like a foster care system for prisoners. You take them in, then you provide a check at the end of the month or at the beginning of the month, so they can pay for some of the expenses of these individuals and keep them at home. The empirical data has suggested that people that go back to a family life, people that are formerly incarcerated, succeed by overwhelming numbers than people who go into a shelter system or go into supportive housing. So why not help them get back into the family unit? And this support system for the family will help them succeed. This is a new program that, again, came to mind as of today's hearing, and we're going to propose legislation so that we can have it as a pilot program to see how it works in the city. I think it'll be successful.
You got a price tag on it?
Well, they're asking for $500,000 as a pilot program. If it succeeds,
$500,000. I mean,
yeah, it's not a big hit.
American, that may sound like a lot, but that's not a lot of money.
I mean, talk about a $143 billion budget. It's nothing. So if it works, think out of the box again. If it works, it'll save us a lot more than $500,000.
And we would wait, of course, till the next session to see how this plays out.
That's correct. We're still trying. I mean, again, it's a very relatively new concept, and we're going to fine tune it. If in fact the Republicans are able to retain control of the Senate, then there has to be more fine tuning to get it through them, because again, if anyone has that mentality is why should we do anything for prisoners, it's the Republican right.
We got about a minute left. Give me or give the viewers a grade for the state legislature on how they did legislatively through the last session before we get into the next
Well,
session.
it depends. I mean, you can't do it overall. It depends on
Rats,
what
I was trying so hard.
Look, I think the speaker, this is one of the best budgets for the common person, for people in most need, for education. I think this was a very good budget the speaker got out through the assembly, and he should be congratulated for that. You know, the speaker and I have had our differences, but I have to give credit where credit is due, and I think Carl did a very good job with this budget, and he should be applauded for his efforts.
We're going to squeeze one last question in. Where are we at on mayoral control? This is a very serious issue, regardless of how you feel about it. How do you see it playing out? We got about, I don't know, 20 seconds left.
I think ultimately the mayor will get it either 1 to 3 years with mayoral control. Flanagan is trying to use that issue to extract other things from the city of New York. I think ultimately he'll get mayoral control. I'm not sure he'll get 4 years, but he'll get additional time.
And of course, I would just editorialize that it should not be about this particular mayor or that particular mayor. It's obviously more about a policy for
But the Republicans don't see it that way, because when it was when Bloomberg, it was 7 years.
All right, Assemblyman Louis Sepulveda, always a great guest.
Thank you.
Always great to have you, and we certainly will invite you back. For folks who didn't know, it's his 15th appearance on our program, which we appreciate. Folks, well, let's just review the viewer mail. Last week we did a show on UPK. We got a note on Facebook from someone named Elizabeth. Said Region 1 District 9's early reading first grade demonstrated what can be done in Bronx pre-K classrooms when teachers are given long-term research-based professional development and learn how to provide young children emergent literacy experiences as readers and writers. We thank Elizabeth S. for her comments, and if you have further questions or comments on anything you heard on tonight's show or anything going on in the Bronx, then email them to us at BronxTalk@BronxNet.org. You put them on our Facebook page, and we'll read them on the air during a future edition of our program. We ask you to like Bronx Talk on Facebook, and you can check out our archives at BronxNet.org. You'll find Bronx Talk on the lower right navigation bar. Now, next week, a big show. We'll be hosting a debate in the Democratic primary for the 13th Congressional District, which is the seat being vacated by Charles Rangel, and it will be broadcast during our regular times through the week of June 20. All the candidates have confirmed their participation. That should be 9 candidates. Unbelievable. Should be an excellent program. We hope you will join us. Thanks to producer Jayla Jubetis, and also to our director is Shirley Arietta. And thanks to the cast of thousands around here, and to you, and to him. And we'll see you next week. Good night.